Conversation with a man who is very outspoken when it comes to tertiary education, and there's never a dull moment when you have him as your guest on television. We're going to be exploring the future of university education, COVID-19, and the Public Universities Bill. There's a lot of fascinating stuff to get through tonight, and I'm pretty curious about COVID-19 and what it holds for public education, but university education, really, in this country and across the globe. Thankfully, my guest tonight has been writing about this and thinking through what universities across the continent have been doing. There are fundamental changes, and many have actually predicted that university education will not be the same after COVID-19. But in what specific ways will university education change lastingly after COVID-19? We're going to be exploring that fascinating conversation once we get into that. Then there is the big conversation also about something that will become a new model, I guess, on how Ghana runs its public universities. A very controversial bill that is just about, when Parliament resumes, will become one of the main highlights of what this Parliament about to resume will consider and possibly pass, that will fundamentally change tertiary education in this country. As we know this, the bill is to, among other things, provide procedure for establishment of public universities. Even there are issues that we'll get into. The principles of management of the public universities itself. Also, we know legal status of public universities, which until recently has been okay. Then the government decides, let's introduce a bill to harmonize, which the word reviews often. Procedure for financing public universities. Some say he who pays the piper must call the tune, and if government is paying the public universities to run, they must have a bigger say in its affairs, administration and supervision of activities of public universities. And you will see how the government's prominence in the bill that has been proposed has become one of the thorny issues that is, splitting heads. There have been mixed reactions from academia, by the way, and one of the fundamental accusations leveled against government when this became an issue was that academic freedom was going to be curtailed. And this is one of the thorny issues, out of the total membership of the University Council of 13, the government has the lion's share, the bigger majority of people on it, which tilts everything in favor of the government. It's one of the things that UTAG has maintained, and the University Teachers Association of Ghana. They've recently been doing quite some work across the country, putting together their views before Parliament resumes for this particular bill to be considered. This is one of the things that they put forward also. They also believe that graduate students, that is the GRASAG, have been excluded from the council. In fact, if you speak to GRASAG, we understand that they've been left very upset by this, and the view is that the SLC should represent them. But the argument is that GRASAG is quite a different entity, and they represent a different constituency in the university community. Interesting. Centralized admissions, and for me, this is a big deal. Centralized admissions procedure that this law is proposing, if passed, will become law and the norm. Just if you're wondering what centralized admission is, think about admissions into senior high school. That is centralized admission. And so once you finish school, regardless of if you went to Aquinas like I did or you went to St. Augustine's like you did, you all apply, and then the Ghana Education Service has this very controversial, as you've seen, the central admission computerized placement system that then decides where you go, right? I mean, if you want to go to Aquinas or you want to go to St. Augustine's, that makes the decision for you. And then they put you there. But you have to make a decision, by the way, and then they rate it and grade the schools. There's going to be something similar for the universities under this particular bill. So you finish Aquinas and you want to go to University of Ghana, you make a choice, but you apply and it goes to a centralized system that then posts you to universities across the country based on the courses that you would want to select and study. Very controversial. And UTAG's point is that if this is allowed to hold, we're going to have the chaos that we've seen every time when we have the computerized placement system into senior high schools play out at the tertiary level as well. But as you're concerned, Bona, we'll try and interrogate that when my guest joins me. Universities will also compete for high caliber applicants as well. It will take away their power to do this. Now, and there's also the chaos that they touched on, as we've seen already, with the entrance into the secondary level, the senior high school level. So the conversation really is interrogating this new approach to doing things at the tertiary level, which the bill is proposing to do a whole raft of changes, fundamentally will define how tertiary education is run in this country. But also, I'm curious to know the COVID-19 implications on tertiary education in the short term, but also in the long term. Join me as we host Professor Ernest Ayite up next. Stay with me. And thank you for joining us here on PM Express. Again, I'm in face mask, and I am struggling, I must admit, with it. But it is a new normal, and so we have to respect the fact that the experts have told us that if you want to control and win the war against COVID-19, we all have to bear with wearing uncomfortable face masks in conversations such as this, especially when you have a guest in the studio who, of course, we are still respecting social distancing, but, well, as they say, research has evolved and the face mask is now a must. In fact, there's a law backing the compulsory wearing of face masks, and as journalists, we are part of those listed under those who must compulsorily wear it with our guests. Dare I refuse to expect what the authorities have decided to implement. And so tonight, my guest, Professor Ernest Ayite, he is a former Vice-Chancellor of the University of Ghana, is in the studio with me for a fascinating conversation about COVID-19, the future of university education, rather, really, COVID-19 and the universities, public universities bill. Prof, thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me.
I can't start without asking you first, are you comfortable in that mask?
I wish I didn't have to wear it.
Oh, goodness. I mean, you should watch how we were struggling behind the scenes, just whether to take it off and observe social distancing, and we just decided, let's wear it. I think it's the best option we settled on. And Prof, talking about COVID-19, you, together with two of your colleagues, have written a fascinating article in the University World News Africa edition. And you were analyzing how universities across the continent are performing in terms of the work you're doing around the COVID-19 pandemic. Let me start first by asking you, how are Ghanaian universities faring, in your view?
Very, very well, I must say. One of the things that struck me very early in this pandemic was how much universities elsewhere, in Europe, in the US, were very much a part of the fight to contain the pandemic. So if you look at the UK, for example, a lot of the work has been done by Imperial College, UCL, King's College, Oxford, and so on. A lot of the work that has informed what the government has done and is doing. The same thing when you go to Germany, you go to Belgium, so on. A lot of the work is coming from universities. So I began asking myself, what are we in Africa doing? Are we also in a similar situation? Of course, in Ghana, the role played by Noguchi Memorial Institute for Medical Research is notable. It's very much what everybody talks about. But beyond that, there are many other entities at the universities, schools, departments that are very much involved in doing things. And so we began to, we wrote to 16 universities asking them, the vice chancellors, to tell us what they were doing to support the fight against the pandemic. And I was very surprised. So the first thing that they informed us about was the fact that they've had to close down their universities, sometimes ahead of the national directive to do so, an example being the University of Ghana. So they're making arrangements to continue with their programs using online facilities. That for me was a major revelation in the sense that for a long time, African universities have been struggling with the whole concept of distance education. The absence of the right infrastructure has been a major stumbling block. And now, out of necessity, they were able to mobilize and begin, even if with problems. Another area I found very interesting was the area of testing. Apart from University of Ghana, we also know about the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. All around Africa, universities have been involved in testing. In South Africa, for example, Wits University has been extremely well placed to support with Pretoria, the same thing. So you found that happening. In Ethiopia, Addis Ababa University has been very much a part of it. Then another area that universities were contained, in almost every country, there's a national response team. And that national response team is dominated by people from the universities, medical schools, pharmacy schools, the social sciences, chemical engineering, and others. They've been very much present in the, it varies from country to country, but it's obvious that the kind of research being done in many of these schools is relevant to what can be pursued by governments. And I do hope that after the pandemic, governments will maintain the same relationship as they've had with the universities in the course of the pandemic. One area that I found extremely insightful, and which I again hope that will be a game changer, is vaccine research. Everybody thinks vaccines are best or can only be made in the north. Clearly, see, I'm struggling with my...
Yes. Yeah.
You know, clearly, there are a number of research teams at the University of Ghana. We've seen the work being done by Professor Wandare and his people at Watbip and Noguchi. At Wits University, Cape Town, University of Cape Town, Stellenbosch. Pretoria is part of a major WHO-sponsored activity aimed at vaccine research. So it's not only European or North American universities that are doing the serious research, but there are Africans doing cutting-edge research, work that should help the world to find a cure or a vaccine for the COVID-19 challenges that we have. So there's a lot happening.
Part of your article that fascinated me was a bit about engagement with African governments in this fight. Ghana has a peculiar, very interesting case because, I don't know if you recall, just a couple of weeks back, there was a big controversy over testing, right? And whether the testing numbers are being bloated, etc. And your colleagues at Noguchi were caught up in the middle of that. They had to come and explain because they were the professionals. And yet, because of the collaboration with government, and you know how generally when you're dealing with government, the public reception of what the government is saying is different from when you hear an expert from a university. But they are working together. And so somehow the spillover effect is that their work then begins to be questioned. You watch that space, and I wonder whether Ghana is the only place where this is playing out or is happening elsewhere. But what's your view on that tension that we saw last year? For example, for your colleague at Noguchi, now had to go to a government press conference to now try and explain the real science behind it.
I fully appreciate the challenges that result from that impasse. What it tells me is that academics need to do what they've always done, what they've been trained to do. Just stay with the facts. It's not your responsibility to go and interpret or present things on behalf of government, unless required to do so.
But if the government says come and do it, do you have a choice?
Yes, when the government says come and do it, say what you've seen at the lab. Your job is to tell the people what your results say. It is not your responsibility to modify them or make them more appealing. It's your job. It may be boring. I know many people find academics boring, We often are boring, but that's the job. Just say what the figures suggest and leave it there. Whatever interpretation people want to add to it, that's their business.
That is a very interesting point, and I want to use that to come to public universities bill, because there's a bit of what you said in the challenge I've heard the likes of yourself and the vice chancellors and other stakeholders mention and say, this bill will heighten the tensions between academia and government with the way we do our politics in Ghana. It will make it worse then. What's your view on that? You think that this bill, from just this conversation we're having, just this tension that we've seen in COVID-19 play out, will make things worse than it already is in terms of relationships that the universities have with the government?
This bill, if indeed it gets passed into the act that governs how our universities are established and run, will be extremely unfortunate. It will destroy everything that universities are meant to represent. Universities are not simply there to train people and give them degrees. The main function for which governments everywhere in the world spend lots and lots of money to put up universities is to generate knowledge, so that the knowledge will be used for social and economic development. That's the main reason. And for this, what you want is men and women who are curious about the things that happen around them, curious about what will make development go faster, curious about how people will respond to things, whether treatment or whatever. So as soon as you take away that incentive to be curious, that incentive to search for knowledge, you effectively make the university quite useless.
Does this bill do that?
That's exactly what it,
Specifically how?
Yeah. The bill seeks to put in place only one law that will govern how universities are set up. The first thing that we should be asking those who are behind it is, what makes it necessary to do that? Every university that you have in Ghana has been set up, every public university has been set up on the back of an act of parliament. And the act specifies exactly what the university is expected to do. That act represents the charter that you give to a university. It's a document officially saying from government, we are giving you the license to operate as a university. And these are our expectations as a people. These are our expectations. And so when government sets up that university, it gives that mandate to a university council. And the principle has always been non-interference in the way the university operates. So you, the government, you own the university, but you have entrusted its operations and management and governance to a council of people that can be trusted, a council of people who are knowledgeable, people that have, through experience, managed to establish themselves as capable of running universities. What this does, what this new bill does, is ignore all the different existing acts without reason, without good reason, in my view, and I'll come to why I say without good reason. Ignore them and put in place one to govern all of them, which therefore means that the culture, the history, the style, the governance arrangements are all ignored. Ignored for no apparently good reason. When you read the memorandum accompanying the bill to Parliament, the reason it gives for introducing this new bill is that the universities have, what do you call it? It gives two reasons. The first, basically, and let me quote it here. Even though at the establishment of each public university, roles were defined for the public, almost all of the public universities have veered away from their core discipline. Now, this is the first reason given. So KNUST was set up to be involved in science and technology. They are doing business, they are doing...
But that is true.
That is true, yes. That's the act, that having a new act, stop it.
Because I've seen in the 2021 that now KNUST cannot do humanities anymore.
Yeah. So having a new act doesn't solve that problem.
But it doesn't.
I'm coming. The second reason given is that...
I don't know if you could explore that a bit more before we go to the second reason.
It's an important thing. Okay. I want to deal with the two together. Okay. I want to make the point that the two reasons given in the memo don't really provide any logical...
but on the first reason you cited, it is explicit in the 2021 that KNUST, if this is passed, the way it's been structured, can no longer do humanities.
Yeah.
But that cures the problem, does it not? That if it's the belief that KNUST is strayed, then go and do science and technology.
So if KNUST was straying, what stopped you over the past 20 years, 15 years, from telling KNUST, we have a problem with you? Having a new act doesn't solve that problem.
But the law brings finality to that particular solution.
There was a law which specified the same things. So you're not being able to implement your own law does not mean that you will implement this new one better. Let me go to the second reason given. It talks about universities having a lot more resources than they used to have, and how in the last few years, every report of the Auditor General has exposed financial improprieties.
True.
True. Is there more financial impropriety at the universities than in the rest of the public sector? When I was Vice Chancellor...
But that shouldn't be a reason why you shouldn't do something about the university's problem of financial impropriety.
Yes, I'm coming. So it's a matter of accountability. So when I was Vice Chancellor, every year I received copies of all the relevant audits done by the Auditor General. I received them, I went through them, looking for any signs of wrongdoing at my university or any other place. On a few occasions, I will see something in one university or the other. In my 6 years, I don't recall seeing any negative or adverse report about my university. Now, when I compare it to other public institutions where there are ministers in charge, I don't find any reason to believe that a minister being in charge of the management of the institution has made them less amenable to financial propriety. I don't see less mention of the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Agriculture, of any other ministry. I don't see anything. So it's not as if there is more impropriety at the universities than there is in other places. Have you put in place a new law for all these other bodies?
But Prof, isn't that why we have laws such as the Asset Declaration Law that targets only, I must emphasize, these public officers, because we know that is one of the ways to deal with the corruption you talk about. Secondly, we have the Special Prosecutors Law that has been passed. Now the OSP is in full force because we all recognize that public sector corruption is a big problem, and so have an OSP. Legal solutions are often been prescribed for problems in the public sector, including what ministries' corruptions, and these two laws, I guess, exemplify that. Why not the public universities? Even if the corruption extends there, it's not as much as you have in the ministries, etc.
Don't get me wrong. I am not saying that the public university should be immune from accountability. You don't take away any impropriety, if there is any, by simply having a new law that sets up the university. There was a law. So unless you can show me that the old law was deficient, that the old law couldn't deal with this, and no effort is made in this new law to discuss that.
But isn't that implied that if every year the Auditor General's report...
But it's not true. It is not true anyway. As I said, I read these reports regularly with a lot of interest.
Maybe not UG, but it's always there with public universities.
It's always there for Ministry of Health. It's always there for Ministry of Education itself. It's always there for every public entity. It's there. So if you don't cure these things by simply having new laws, you enforce the laws. If you found that vice chancellors were being negligent, deal with them. If you found registrars were being negligent, deal with them. If you have to put people in prison, put them in prison. But simply saying that because there were some financial improprieties, we are putting aside all the laws and putting in place one law, it doesn't solve that problem. The problem is going, if that is really the problem, and I don't believe it is, I don't believe there's any more impropriety at the university than there is in other public entities. If that was the problem, the solution is not a new law. The solution will be elsewhere. If you can show me that the governance in our universities has broken down, and that breakdown is attributable to the law, then you are making a decision. But you haven't shown me that. I haven't seen anywhere, an argument being made that governance in our universities has broken down.
Let me give you an example.
Yeah, show me.
And I'll give the example after this quick break. You want to stay with us for that? That example, I guess, will lead us to one of the most controversial specific aspects of the Public Universities Bill. The bit about the most powerful body in the university is the University Council. That example I'll cite will go directly to what this new bill is proposing to do with the council, which I guess is at the heart of the controversy. The government, politicians, want to take control of running our universities. Stay with us. You're still live here on PM Express. A fascinating conversation with Professor Ernest Aite, former Vice-Chancellor of the University of Ghana. Prof, before we went for the break, you had made the statement that you should be shown an example of a university, breaking down in terms of governance. And I can cite UK and UST. A few months, more than a year back, there was a total breakdown of law and order. And the view was that the governance in the university simply broke down to the point where students took matters into their own hands, rioting, destroyed property. There was a curfew. Military had to be brought in to control matters. Isn't that a justification for having, in this particular bill as proposed, a university council on which government has the bigger majority and a bigger say?
In the preparation of the Constitution for the Fourth Republic, there was a lot of interest in how to preserve the autonomy and the independence of universities, public universities. So, and that has been there from over 70 years ago when the University of Ghana was first established. Preserving that autonomy and the independence of the university to take decisions that are deemed to be in the interest of the university has always been very important. The example you gave, KNUST, so the University Council, not the Vice Chancellor, the University Council took a decision that was met with some disenchantment by a section of students. The students then wrote to government to protest the decision of the council. That is not new. That is not new at all. It has happened almost every year that I have been associated with universities in Ghana, where councils take decisions and students are not happy with that, or staff are not happy, and so they write to government. If the government, in my view, had told the students, go and get the matter resolved at your university, in my view, that would have been the end of the matter.
The council had a vested interest, the government believed, and wouldn't have dealt with the matter.
No, the council, every council, it has made up of individuals who may have their own views about things and so on. But the council as an entity had taken that decision because it believed it was in the interest of the university. That council, if you go to them and say, look, we want you to revisit your decision, earlier decision, is duty bound to have another look at it.
But they are autonomy. They have autonomy.
Yeah, they don't have to change their minds, but they will look at it again. It happens all the time.
But that's what government wants.
Yeah, but unless you want to tell them that you wanted them to change the decision.
Yes. Because at that point they believed it was the best interest of the public for that decision to be changed.
Who made that determination?
Because we saw the riots.
The riots came after the interference. The riots came after the interference. If the university had been left alone to resolve that matter, it could have. We've seen many disagreements on campuses for decades in our universities. They didn't have to lead to that kind of vandalism. They didn't have to lead to the kind of violence that we saw. The violence came, and that's a good example of what happens when politicians interfere with the running of universities. The KNUST thing, I tell you, is a very, very good indication of what's going to happen once this bill gets...
But at the time that happened, the government didn't have the majority on the council.
The government didn't have the majority on the council.
And yet we saw the chaos that we saw at the KNUST.
I'm sure you recall also that the council was suspended.
Yes.
Yeah. So
but the council was suspended because of the chaos.
Look, there are many, many things that happened that could have been avoided. Many things that happened that could have been avoided in the KNUST thing.
So doesn't this fix it? 13 members now. Government is going to have 8, and then other bodies will have 5.
What this does, by the reconstruction of the council, is basically allowing government to more or less be able to change things on campuses whenever the Minister of Education decides that it's about time we change things.
What is wrong with that?
Well, if the Minister of Education knew better how to run universities, they don't need the councils. They don't even need the councils. Everything that they want to do, just take it to the Minister of Education, decide it, approve it, and they go on.
But the
idea behind having these independent councils, carefully selected, is the fact that they come in with their own independence. Men and women who know they are there not because of a party that they belong to. They are there not because of some connection to the minister or the president or anybody. They are there because they are knowledgeable. They know what is good for a university. That's why they are there. They bring their knowledge, whether from finance or from law or from anything, the specific subject matters, to the council. And they are able to show the council, the university, how best to chart particular courses and give opinion and so on. They are a good sounding board for the university managers. As soon as you make that council and a political organ that responds largely to what the Minister of Education wants, you've taken away the essential character of a university. You've taken it away and given that character, turn it into a political thing managed by the minister. And that is what is wrong.
Okay, so, but you enumerated the actual reasons why at least government has articulated in a memorandum why they want this done. You say it's none of those 2 reasons. But if that's not the reason, then what is the motivation then for this?
You know, when you set up a university and you give them that charter, the act saying that this is what we want you to do, the act is supposed to empower the university managers, empower them to pursue all the expectations that the society has placed on them. So it's a tool that guides them. They use that tool to prepare their own statutes and other governance instruments. That's what they do. What we have here is a situation where, as opposed to empowering them, we are providing a tool for controlling them. That is where the problem is.
So you think the real motive here is for politicians to control the academics?
Precisely. The real motive here, I mean, reading the memorandum, reading all the clauses in there, what I see is government saying, I don't trust you, universities, because you don't know how to run the universities. And so I am going to control you from the center. The Minister of Education is going to be responsible, acting through what is currently the National Council for Tertiary Education, which is being reformed into a commission. So using the commission to exercise the powers of the minister in the affairs of the university. And that is wrong. What
is wrong with that? Because there are many aspects of our democracy. And
because it is taken away from the independence of the university. I keep hearing the argument that he who plays the piper calls the tune.
That is true.
Yeah. He who plays the piper calls the tune may apply in some places, not everywhere. The fact that the government has set up a university with its resources, the fact that it pays the staff of these universities, it makes it imperative that the government holds these institutions to account, that they hold them to account. You don't hold them to account by telling them every day what to do. You don't hold them to account by telling them what kind of research they can do, what they cannot do.
But that's not what this is.
This new bill...
Does it give them control about what research they should do?
This new bill says that no university can sign an agreement, whether for an academic or an academic purpose, with any entity, whether in Ghana or outside, without the approval of the Tertiary Education Commission. In the previous draft, it was the Minister of Education. What it means is, if I want to do research on informal finance, that's the area I'm interested in, and I meet colleagues at the University of Manchester, and we want to pursue a project to do research. Before we can sign an agreement, I have to go to the Tertiary Education Commission for approval to do research, to do research on informal finance. That is the beginning of taking away my freedom. My freedom. So there's somebody at the commission who can decide whether I can do the research or not. Because if in his opinion or her opinion, what I want to do is not important, it's not priority determined by him or her, then you can do it. We won't approve it. It is academic freedom means that I, as a researcher, can decide what I want to research in, and I can look for the resources. Even if you won't give me the resources, that's your problem. But I can look for the resources to do the work I want to do. That's what I'm interested in. And we can also take it for granted that being a Ghanaian, I know what Ghana needs, and I can decide what is good for Ghana also. Not only the person at the Tertiary Education Commission, but I can decide what is good for Ghana. Right now, the law being proposed seems to suggest that some people at the Ministry of Education, Tertiary Education Commission, know better how to run a university. And that's not possible.
Talking about running a university, one of the things that is proposed is the centralized admission system. And by the way, if you know what pertains with the senior high school admissions, a computer centralized admissions placement system, is similar to what has been proposed in this bill. What's your reaction to that?
I'm of two minds in that one. I've seen it in Nigeria. The Nigerians have it. They've had it and they've had problems with it. They've really tried to find solutions to it. But I can't say that they have solved all the problems they have with us after many, many years. I tend to take the view that if something is not broken, you don't need to fix it. What is wrong with the way we do our admissions at the moment? The chief complaint I've heard is that it costs students too much buying application forms from Legon, from KNUST, from Cape Coast, etc. It costs them too much. Yes, that's something that we should be worried about.
But it also...
But that the solution comes from centralizing the admissions, I don't think so.
It also marginalizes the poor and underprivileged.
So there are ways in which you can deal with that. By centralizing the admissions, it does not necessarily provide for the poor and underprivileged. Today, if you go to all the universities, they make provision for students from less endowed schools. They do that already. They make provision for assistance to students who cannot afford it. So you are creating something to solve a problem which may not be as big as we would like to make it appear. It's not the biggest problem. And if you look at how the ministry struggles with the admissions for the senior high schools, I wonder what the incentive is for wanting to add
But there's
another.
research elsewhere in the world, and I've seen this one published in 2016 by the German Institute of Labor Economics, and looks at the, by the way, it's practiced elsewhere in Chile, Turkey, Germany, Taiwan, and they found they studied in the Brazilian model. Brazil up to 2010 had what we had, which is every institution decides its admissions. After the study, they found that institutions under the centralized assessment are able to attract students with substantially higher test scores, and that the geographical mobility of admitted students increases. And overall, they found that this was actually very positive for Brazil compared to what they had, which we have currently.
I have it already in Ghana. Those achievements of what you see as happening in Brazil, we already have. In terms of mobility, all you need to do is look at where the students have come from, their backgrounds socially, geographically, and you find out the new benefits of what you see in Brazil are already here.
What should happen to this bill? Currently is going to Parliament.
My appeal to Parliament is, if there are problems with governance at the universities, let us fix them. They can be fixed easily. Let's take out the politics. Let us fix those problems. Let us not rush into having this law, because this law will not solve the problems that it says it is going to solve. It will not solve them. This law only will make the Minister of Education more powerful. It will turn him into the senior vice chancellor of this country.
You turn who? The minister?
The Minister of Education, acting through the Tertiary Education Commission. That's what it seeks to do. It will turn the minister into the final decision maker of how universities are run. But this country has always been worried about that. This country. That is why, in fact, when the National Council for Higher Education was created, it was intended to be a buffer between the Ministry of Education and the universities. So basically, the Minister of Education didn't interfere with the running of the universities. If there were issues of policy that the government was interested in, you pass these through the council, and the council brought together all of the various stakeholders to discuss it. So how the universities responded was largely the result of consensus reached at the council. We have always been worried about ministers interfering with the way universities are run. And this should not be encouraged.
You don't seem to trust the politician at all in having that sort of say in the administration of a university.
I am worried about anybody who wants power that he or she does not have by law.
But they're creating the law to have.
And so you create the law to give yourself power. It is wrong. If there are problems in our university, let's fix them. Let us fix them. It should be possible to fix them.
What should, you've been in a position before. Currently, the Vice Chancellors Ghana seriously considering this. What should you, how should you approach this?
That's a more difficult question. Probably the most difficult question you've asked all evening.
Yes. How should they approach it?
You know, for all of these things, different people have different interests. What KNUST, what UCC, what UG, and so on may see in this will be quite different from what another Vice Chancellor.
But they should have a collective position, definitely.
But they have different interests. So yes, I would leave it to them. I mean, I saw their earlier response to this, to the first draft. I haven't seen any revised ones yet, which was largely negative. They made the same argument that I have made. This revised draft has paid attention to some of the language. But the most important thing, the rationale for introducing this new law has not been dealt with.
Should they reject it?
Parliament should reject it. Parliament should take the acts of all the public universities, study them, see if there's anything wrong with them, see if there are governance issues at our universities, whether they originate from the act. If there's a problem there, then you fix it. The act is important. The act defines the character of the university, the individual act. It defines the character of the university. It is going to establish the culture of that university. It is what people look up to. I heard you say at the beginning that you went to Aquinas,
yes.
And then you went to St. Augustine's. They are both Catholic schools, but they both have very different, very different approaches to. Yes, that's what universities also should.
But I still come back to the point. If this is going to go anywhere, I know government is still looking to hear from all the parties. Should the Vice Chancellors Ghana adopt a similar position to what they previously had, which is this is not good for us?
That's what I was strongest against to them. This cannot be good for university education in Ghana. This is going to leave us with a university system where there's no competition. In academia, there's something called differentiation, where universities try to distinguish themselves. And if we are all looking for a grant, we are a KNUST, UCC, UG, vying for grants. And that's what universities thrive on, grants. Being able to show the subtle differences in how we do things, that is what engenders competition. And that competition brings in their grants. It forces universities to want to improve, not to attract grants. If the university leadership has no incentive to be innovative, because, well, after all, the ministry will decide for us what we can do and what we cannot do.
Then there's no need.
But there's no need. I'll be hesitant to be a vice chancellor if every single agreement I sign...
You're afraid you're going to be a puppet?
Precisely.
Okay.
Precisely.
That is my word, but is that a word you use as well?
No, well, I would look at it differently.
But in effect, the fear is that vice chancellors could become puppets in the hand of a politician who sits at it.
Precisely.
I want to end with something about you. I mean, your legacy. I mean, not everybody knows Professor Aite, but you were there for 6 years, right? There's a quote that I found that you said recently that I really want to put across. And those who went to university when you were there know you. And you said, there's a lot of effort being made to rewrite my legacy. And this is an interview recently. There's a lot of effort going on in Ghana to say Ernest Aite is not as great a guy as you thought he was. A lot of effort is going into this, both at the university, the Ministry of Health, and other places. And this will relate to the controversy surrounding the UG hospital. Do you still hold this view?
For sure. What has changed?
That people are trying to erase your legacy?
You can't erase it. No, you can't erase it. What has happened has happened. If you tell people that this man did that, he did this, he did that, they will believe you for a few weeks, but when they don't see any evidence, they realize that they have been taken for a ride. 2 years ago, I felt